across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
We'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite! He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
It's Friday, just after 7 o'clock, and therefore it must be the mother of all talk shows, the university of the airwaves, the last free space on the mainstream media. And we'll get you talking tonight, that I promise you, not least because the calls are now free. Here's the new telephone number: 0344 499 1000. That's 0344 499 1000. No prizes for guessing what I'm going to be fulminating ferociously about this evening.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Sir John Chilcot, the 2 million word, £10 million, 8-year inquiry man, appeared in front of the House of Commons Select Committee this week. When asked if Tony Blair had lied, he answered with an expression of pure Whitehall Mandarin speak, the likes of which I have never heard. He was asked, had Tony Blair lied? He answered, Mr. Blair went beyond the facts. And thus enters our lexicon a new and damning description of our political class, of whom more later. So just to be sure, folks, the 1 million people who died in the invasion and occupation of Iraq did not really die, they just went beyond life. You can call me on what I'm about to say, or you can tweet me at George Galloway, or at Talk Radio, or at both. Beyond belief is the fact that the political ground is moving under the feet of Hillary Clinton. After all these weeks and months in which it was held as self-evident that Clinton was the next U.S. president, trust me, she's going to have some sleepless nights between now and Tuesday. Donald Trump has moved into the lead in the presidential contest, and in the crucial swing states, Trump has begun to pull ahead, and thus, as they say in the American political parlance, a path not as narrow as before has begun to open, along which Donald Trump might, by the early hours of Wednesday morning, be President-elect Donald Trump. Who'd have thunk it? I'll tell you one of the consequences of that. There will be a peal of laughter from one corner of the earth to the other. There will be a peal of laughter at any subsequent contention that the United States of America is some kind of model, a country built on the genocide of 100 million original inhabitants, then the slavery of millions of black people, and the apartheid after the abolition of slavery. And don't forget, as I tweeted this week. When Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, he turned the cavalry westward to carry out the genocide of the original Americans. Well, all of those crimes and sins will be capped. Actually, whoever is elected president on Tuesday. But my main thunder this evening is reserved for the absurdity of a binding referendum, the final say, said the Prime Minister on introducing the referendum bill now act. The final say will be with the British people on the question of whether or not to leave the European Union. Now, some people have made this very complicated in the last 24 hours. I hear people waxing about the supremacy, even sovereignty of Parliament. Have you seen Parliament? Have you smelt Parliament? I was nearly 30 years in Parliament, and I tell you, I wouldn't send most of the members of Parliament out to buy a loaf. With all that we know about this low Parliament, how can people with a straight face contend that Parliament is supreme, Parliament is sovereign? The people in this country in 2016 are sovereign, are supreme. Not any queen or king, not any court, and certainly not the Augean stables, the gang of thieves and liars who inhabit what is miscalled the British Parliament. In any case, there's no need to argue about it. It was clear in the introduction to the referendum bill that the final say on whether or not to leave the European Union would lie with the British people. But that was overturned by the High Court judges yesterday. There's no point in people obfuscating that. It was overturned. And for this reason, you cannot leave the European Union without triggering Article 50. And therefore, it is axiomatic upon the decision of the referendum that Article 50 has to be triggered. Not if the members of Parliament want to or not. Now, some say the MPs wouldn't dare not trigger it. That isn't the point. Article 50 is a necessary method of executing the binding decision made by the British people in June in the European referendum. Now, it is unlikely that the MPs in the Commons will block Brexit. But what about the Lords? What if the Lords seek to block the triggering of Article 50? What if the Commons doesn't block the triggering of Article 50, but begins to amend the government's motion to do so, with all kinds of conditions, some of which I might like, some of which I might detest? It then slows to a snail's pace the method of executing the British popular will. And that's unacceptable. I said on the morning of the referendum result, as did Jeremy Corbyn, by the way, though he's since resigned from it, I said that morning, trigger Article 50 now, right now, this day. And if she had done that, if Cameron had done it before leaving, if Cameron hadn't left, or if May had done it immediately upon becoming the Prime Minister, we wouldn't be in this mess. But by delaying, she has now left the uncertainty potentially open as far as the eye can see. Now, there's only one way out of this, and that is a general election. Because if the people, as I contend, are sovereign in this country, then if anybody is going to decide what kind of Brexit we're going to have, it must be the British people in a general election. I have no problem about Parliament being involved in what the British negotiating position should be, but not this Parliament. A new Parliament has every right to say we must defend workers' rights, we must keep human rights law, we must secure the position of those immigrants from the European Union countries that are already here. I have many conditions myself. Jeremy Corbyn has many. Many of his are the same as mine, but some are different, and one or two crucially so. I've got no problem with that. But the question of triggering Article 50 and beginning the 2-year clock is a decision that has already been taken by the British people in the referendum. And no bewigged popinjay in the High Court has the right to defy it. And no bewigged popinjay, yes, Michael Fabricant, I mean you, no bewigged popinjay in Parliament has the right to block it either. And therefore, now that the court has opined, the matter goes to the Supreme Court. What an irony it would be should it end up in the European Court. But I don't suppose anybody would be up for that level of embarrassment. But it's all an embarrassment as far as I am concerned. And finally, let me say this. If any attempt is made through obfuscation, through the placing of obstacles, or through direct defiance, if anyone seeks to block the sovereign decision of the British people to leave the European Union, there is a risk to social peace in this country. If we were not the British, if this were not Britain, if this were, say, Europe, then burning tires would already be on the street. Maybe burning vehicles would be on the street. But because we don't do that kind of thing, at least not for a few 100 years, the British people are being asked stoically to observe what seems to me like an establishment maneuver in the dark to cheat, to rob the British people of the destiny that they have chosen.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B-I-G-G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
On Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Okay, 0344 499 1000. That's the national rate. That's the telephone number. 0344 499 1000. You can also text us, of course, and you can, as many of you are, tweet us at George Galloway or at Talk Radio. Now, I had my say. Let's hear from an expert, Peter Cattrall, a lecturer in public policy and democracy at the very prestigious Hansard Society. Peter, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello, George. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad that you could make it, Peter, because I want you to help us clear one or two things up. I see some are fools, some just misguided, claiming that this is a rerun of the English Civil War and that any right-thinking person would be on Cromwell's side. This flows from the royal prerogative issue, which is the prerogative with which Mrs. May, if she had had any sense, would have triggered Article 50 at the first moment that she was able to do so. But actually, it's not a rerun of the Civil War, is it? It's about whether the people's decision in the referendum is superior to any decision that Parliament might make or the courts might advise that they should make. Am I right about that?
Well, not exactly, no. It's not that it's a rerun of the Civil War, although, as you say, it is partly about the use of the royal prerogative, and it's certainly not about stopping the people's will being enacted. What it is about is the law. So the judgment starts off by saying this is not a matter of politics, and it has no bearing whatsoever on the question of whether Britain is leaving the EU or not. It is a matter of pure law. Now, of course, the referendum was set up as a result of a law enacted in Parliament. So complaining about what happened as a result of one law and having that law then scrutinised seems a bit kind of odd. The problem with that piece of legislation, the 2015 European Union Referendum Act, is it's extremely badly drafted, as the judges point out in their conclusions. So it does not establish what the powers that flow from that act could be deemed to be. It says the judgment indeed says that all parties to the case agreed that the Act does not give the power to trigger Article 50 because Article 50 is not even mentioned in that piece of legislation. So the government therefore had to go for using the royal prerogative. Now, their claim for using the royal prerogative is based upon the idea that treaties, which are also never consulted with the public, are somehow the way of doing this thing. Now, historically, the right to make and break treaties, the right to make law, the right to prorogue Parliament, all of these kinds of things, as you know, have been Crown prerogatives. The question is, does the government have a royal prerogative to enact something, to change the law in this area when it's not been specifically provided for?
Well, look, you're at the Hansard.
No, I'll just finish this point off, George, if I may. Because it's not just about a treaty, it's not just about international law, it's also about domestic law. And that's part of the court case, that the Parliament has not specifically provided for this to happen, therefore Parliament has a right to scrutinise. There is, of course, a huge difference between scrutiny and veto, although a lot of mischievous people seem to be misconstruing the relationship.
Well, but Peter, there's no difference at all, because neither you nor I know what the result in the voting lobby would be if someone tabled a veto to whatever new legislation is now going to be necessary as a result of the court case. So a veto is in the hands of 650 members of Parliament, or any majority of those voting. So it is entirely in the lap, if not of the gods, then of those lesser gods, the members of the House of Commons. Now, here's my point. You're from the Hansard Society, and I was nearly 30 years in Parliament. Both of us know that British legislation is very seldom badly drafted. Now, it's true that Article 50 isn't referred to in the Act because there is no need to. Article 50 is axiomatically required to be triggered if the sovereign decision of the people in the referendum is to be given effect to. Now, it is surely, for me, and I'm not a lawyer, it's a matter of simple logic. You cannot leave the EU unless you trigger Article 50. We voted to leave the EU, therefore, de facto, Article 50 automatically has to be triggered, surely.
Well, no. Why should it be? It's not in the Act, nor is anything else in the Act. There is no description in that Act of anything any description of what happens as a result of the legislation. The only thing we have is the commitment of the government that they would respect an in-out referendum. That's in the Tory manifesto. They also, of course, have on the same page of that manifesto a commitment to remaining in the single market. So there is no clarity about exactly what leaving the EU actually means in practice.
Well, the Prime Minister's words, no, Peter, the Prime Minister's words in introducing the bill were that the British people would have the final say. But now they won't have the final say. The final say will be the majority in the House of Commons when this matter, presumably unless the Supreme Court overturns yesterday's decision, is debated and voted upon. So the final say is not with the British people.
The final say would not have been with the British people in the way Cameron drafted that bill anyway, because it was not something which specified what a leave process actually meant in practice. And you know that. So it is pointless to argue that it means anything else.
Well, it's not at all pointless. There's millions of people incensed and fearful about what the consequences of this might be.
I absolutely agree, but I think it is not the case that this means that there will be a veto.
But you don't know that, Peter. Nobody knows that.
No, of course we don't know that absolutely, but what we are aware of is enough Labour MPs have said that they will vote leave because that's what their constituents want, to make it sure that will happen. I know lots of Tory MPs who will vote leave when it comes to a vote because of those things as well. But what doesn't necessarily specify is how or what they think they're voting for. Now, it seems to me that what the government want to go for is something which avoids tying their hands so that they can they have a maximum flexibility over how they actually try and negotiate Brexit. And I can understand them wanting to do that. But the problem is that you're going to end up with a situation where they're going to be delivering a Brexit which probably very few people voted for. Certainly the guy who resigned from Parliament today didn't vote for the kind of Brexit that Mrs May is heading for.
Well, the referendum was a binary choice, in or out. Now, what kind of Brexit is entirely a matter for Parliament, for the public, for the press, for the media. Everyone should have a say on what kind of Brexit. And the best way of testing that is for Mrs May to table her intended form of Brexit and Mr Corbyn to table his, and then have a general election, surely.
That would certainly be a more satisfactory outcome than this, because I suspect what the government are trying to do is avoid scrutiny over these things. And I think a lot of people's anxiety about this was, of course, not just related to this referendum, but the risk that it would set a precedent for governments in future to use referendums to enact things without scrutiny, without being held to account for what they're doing. And as you can see with the governments at the moment, they've been introducing various ideas which weren't in the Tory manifesto at the last election, and almost treating the referendum as giving them a new mandate to do a whole series of things that they didn't put in the manifesto, whilst also junking loads of things which were in the Tory manifesto at the last election. So, yes, a new general election would be desirable, I think, in these circumstances. Whether it's going to happen is, of course, another question. I note that a number of Tory Brexiters are now talking about their desire for a new election, but I suspect Mrs May will be resistant to it for at least two important reasons. One of which is that, of course, she wants the boundary changes to go through before the next election. And the other, well, I wonder what you think about this, being a Scot, George. Do you think that there's a risk or a possibility that in Scotland a new general election will be treated as a issue for a mandate for a second Indie ref?
No, I don't think so. Of course, the Scottish National Party are virtually hegemonic, although one shouldn't, at least in terms of seats, but not necessarily in terms of votes. A very significant number of SNP supporters voted for Brexit, and a former minister, Alex Neil, in the newspapers in the Telegraph today, tells us that he and a number of SNP members of the Scottish Parliament actually voted for Brexit in secret. The majority of people in Scotland at this moment do not want even a second referendum on independence. Never mind have come to the conclusion that they're going to vote for it. Of course, the boundary changes is an issue, and that doesn't happen until 2018. But I believe that the case for a general election will become irresistible before then, because Mrs. May cannot go into the next election other than promising a hard Brexit, let's use that shorthand, and therefore Labour and the Liberals will go into that election, I believe, promising something less than a hard Brexit. And we need to know where the public stand on this, or we could have a government negotiating a form of Brexit that the majority of people in the country don't want.
I absolutely agree. I suspect a lot of Tories, like Stephen Phillips, don't want the hard Brexit that it looks like significant members of the government actually favour. What Theresa May means by Brexit is, of course, a slightly different matter, because she's been very careful to keep her cards very close to her chest, both during the campaign and subsequently. And I wonder whether that's one reason why we might not be quite so likely to see a general election soon, because it seems to me that one of the reasons why she doesn't want parliamentary scrutiny of the Brexit process is not just because she thinks that the other side might veto it, because they can't, let's face it, she's got a majority in Parliament, but because she's afraid of what her own backbenchers might do in terms of kicking off.
Well, Tory Prime Ministers afraid of their own backbenchers over Europe. Who'd have thunk it, Peter? Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you very much for joining us. That was Peter Cattrall, lecturer in public policy and democracy at the Hansard Society.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Coming up later in the programme, we'll talk to Daniel Rachel, the author of Walls Come Tumbling Down, a terrific book which I have had the benefit of reading. And after 10 o'clock, the great Ian Lee is here with his unique style of late-night talk. In fact, the phrase unique style doesn't quite describe it. It is phenomenally brilliant and funny. And tomorrow morning, live from his treehouse, Martin Roberts will be talking about how to go about converting your attic, hydrogen-fueled homes, and how you could end up with a criminal record simply by not cleaning your windows. All of that plus 60s icon Colin Blunstone from the Zombies. That's Home Rule with Martin Roberts tomorrow from 11 a.m. Let's squeeze in a call from Chris in North Yorkshire on Brexit. Go ahead, Chris.
Hello, George. I just wanted to say, I'm a working class bloke, yeah?
Yep.
Who voted to leave the European Union.
Ditto.
And I am absolutely sick to the back teeth of the establishment in this country completely treating me and people of my class like absolute serfs who have no brain, who have no idea what Brexit was all about. And since June the 24th, the day after Brexit, I believe that there has been a concerted effort by the British establishment, through people like Tony Blair, and Mandelson and all the other puppets to deliberately undermine that decision of the British people on June the 23rd. And what they've done is they have muddied the waters. They have created so much confusion, so much chaos, that now people don't know where they are with everything. And I saw Owen Smith on the Daily Politics programme this afternoon, and he unashamedly said that basically this whole thing for him, with a High Court ruling yesterday, was a way of delaying and stalling Brexit.
Yeah, even though his constituents voted heavily in favour of Brexit.
And he came out and he actually said that, like, him and his ilk wanted a second referendum. Now, for me, personally, I feel such a frustration within inside of me because of all this, because it's like pick a card. You can have any card. No, you can't have that card. We picked a card that they didn't want us to have. And because of that, they have such an arrogance. They have such an arrogance that they think they can actually go against their own constituents. And for me personally, I feel as though I have to try, and I'm only just a member of the public, but I feel as though I have to try and do something to try and stop this. You know, whether it's a march, a rally, and I hope and I pray that, because this is, I'm of the left, and all my family on my dad's side have been of the left, socialists, trade unionists, but this isn't an issue of left and right, and it's been made to be an issue of solely the right, and it's left and right on both sides that wanted to leave the European Union. People like Tony Benn, God bless his soul, you know, he was a staunch advocate of getting out because it is so undemocratic.
And Bob Crow, God bless his soul too. Bob Crow, Tony Benn, that's the banner that I marched under. That's the direction I voted.
I'm hoping that politicians on the left and the right who can see how undemocratic the European Union is, who can see what a rich man's club it really is, how it has no regard for people at the bottom end of the pyramid. I hope and pray that somebody, a politician or politicians on both sides of the spectrum who want it out, will come together and organise some kind of mass rally or march or something, because it cannot, the British people cannot keep on just accepting this undemocratic carry on from people.
Well,
Gina Miller, who is she?
I have no idea, but it's not her fault that the court decided how it did. If she hadn't brought the case, someone else would have, Chris. But the word you used several times in that excellent call was democratic. This is now not about left or right. This is about the democratic decision that the British people made, and whether or not a judge or an MP has the right to countermand it.
Big Georgie Galloway's back on the radio!
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
On Talk Radio.
0344 499 1000. That's the number to call. As Steve in Nuneaton has, that's why he's up next. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, good evening, George. A pleasure to speak to you this evening.
And to you, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to ask George about the court case this week and about this situation about the scrutiny. The Conservative Party trying to allay scrutiny of itself over the way that it wants to negotiate things into the going out of the EU. Now, I think we can't leave it to the likes of May and Liam Fox and people like that to negotiate. I think the EU referendum was a cross-party thing, George, and I think this ought to be a cross-party thing too.
Well, they offered, and they were right to offer. Corbyn offered a Labour input into the negotiating strategy. and the Tories have refused it.
Of course.
So the responsibility is theirs. They will pay a price if they negotiate a kind of Brexit which the British people don't want. And that's why we need a general election to avoid a final Brexit after 2 years after the triggering of Article 50, which is unacceptable to the British people. There's only two ways out of that. One, you have effectively, as we had in the Second World War, a coalition on this subject, negotiating with the EU, and that's what I would favour.
Yes,
but if we don't have that, then we must have a general election, and each side must table its kind of Brexit. But what can't be allowed, Steve, and what has now been allowed, even if only in theory, by the decision yesterday, is that the House of Commons could vote not to trigger Article 50, could vote not to, therefore, leave the European Union as the people already decided we must.
Yeah. Well, George, I really can't see that will be the case. I can't see that the MPs would vote and stop after the referendum and the people's decision.
Well, the Lords might, Steve.
The Lords, yeah.
They don't have to face anybody.
Yeah, yes, of course, yeah.
They're there forever. More fool us for tolerating that. Steve, thanks for the call. Excellent. David's in Glasgow on the same subject. Let's hear from him. David.
How you doing, George?
Very good. Nice to hear from you. Go ahead.
First of all, I have no respect for those who have no respect for the rule of law. You understand? Ourselves in the English live in civilised countries. We are governed by the law. You understand? Now, as you know, ourselves in English are in a union. As you know, Scotland and England participated in a treaty of union, and both countries introduced that treaty within the domestic laws. Ourselves with the Union with England Act, and English with the Union with Scotland Act. Terms and conditions. The Scottish people said we will surrender some of our independence conditionally with these terms. Do you understand? These terms. And those laws are still the laws of the land. And within the Union with Scotland Act, the English in the 1700s agreed that the private rights of Scottish people will not be altered unless for the benefit of the Scottish people. You understand? Our private rights cannot be altered unless it is done for the benefit of the Scottish people.
What's your point, caller? What's your point, caller?
By the Parliament. That's the law. Explicitly states it can only be altered by the Parliament. I have to respect these three judges in that English High Court. I have to give them total respect.
Are you a Rangers man? You're a Rangers man, David.
Am I a what man?
Are you a Rangers man?
Am I a Rangers man? What's football got to do with anything? What has football got to do with that?
Let's go to Colin. Let's go to Colin in Oldbury on the same subject, but also adding the US. Go ahead, Colin.
Hello, George.
Hi, mate.
Oh, what a mess. An absolute mess we're heading into.
Mm-hmm.
Us and our cousins in America.
Well, I just looked at the latest poll, Colin. The poll of polls, that is the amalgam of all the polls, and it's 45-45.
Oh, it's like, like we said last week, they're both as bad as each other. Our poor people over there are looking into a precipice. There's no way out for them either way. And I would have to urge them, try and look independent, because there's nothing there for them. It's just bickering. Oh, it's just a mess. And the stuff that's coming out about, I don't want to go into it on this show.
No, because it's before the watershed. It's too dirty.
I know. I mean, you've got to get on the horror channel to watch what's going on with that lot.
Very good. Very good.
Disgusting.
Now, Colin, what's your view on the court decision this week?
Oh, well, I'm actually ashamed. I'm disgusted and I'm ashamed that we, the people here, have been told. David Dimbleby questioned politicians. Andrew Neil questioned politicians. I've seen you on Andrew Neil's show, and you've all been questioning these politicians, and the answer was, and Michael Portillo got told the same, it's a simple in or out. You hit it on the nail at the beginning of your show. Simple in or out. We was all told this. We wasn't told about what I said last week about the ready Brexit and all this stuff they're coming out with now. This was in or out. And all I can say is I'm seeing now is these, probably those politicians that are at the top are in on this as well. She's been dragging herself, just waiting for it to go to the court so they can say, well, we'll fling it for a vote in Parliament and all of that. And to me, it's piggy in the middle with people.
Yep,
the people that went for this vote. And also, George, I've got to make an appeal to everybody out there. You need to pull yourselves together. It's beyond the Brexit now. This is your democracy going. This is your democracy going down the pan. And you need to pull together and fight for that. This vote is practically gone as far as they're concerned. They're going to manipulate.
Well, there's no doubt, Colin, and an earlier caller made this clear also, that from the day and hour that we won the referendum and decided to leave, there has been a conspiracy. Yeah. It's a vast conspiracy. George, it involves the European Union. It involves private companies, shortages of Marmite and surcharges on phones and tablets and so on. There's even people, I was reading today, putting up the price of their laundry charges in their hotel and blaming it on Brexit. There's been an avalanche of establishment propaganda to try to persuade people that they made the wrong decision. And now we have a mechanism whereby the people can be cheated out of the decision that we made. Yeah. That's why I'm angry, and that's why everybody else should be angry.
Can I just put this forward as well before I get off?
Yeah.
You know, if they prove to the people here that they can take charge of something like that, which we was told we was going to vote on, and it was going to go through, and Brexit meant Brexit, if they prove to the people, who I feel, some of them are asleep, they don't seem to realise what's going on. They need to pull together and fight for the democracy, because the thing is, they will go for another vote to go into war in the Middle East, and nobody here will have the say on it, because they will have shown you, here's my foot, it's on your face, and we're going to do what we want, and you will back us.
Yep,
Don't
okay.
let it happen, people.
Thanks, Colin. A very sombre warning from Colin there. Regent's Park S&S tweets, the UK is ripe for a new political party, which is not the traditional main two, but not EU-phobic either. What an interesting possibility. Have we got time for Tony in Goole in East Yorkshire this time? Go ahead, Tony.
Hi, George.
Hi.
Thank you for taking my call. I'll keep it quick. I'm just going to simply say I'm not angry. I'm not sad. I just feel sick to the stomach. Me guts have been ripped out. Unlike you, I voted for Remain in the referendum. But this now is just ridiculous. If we're going to get to a situation where the British people have voted and High Court judges and politicians, through their own financial gains and greed, are blocking the will of the British people, that I'm ashamed to have voted, because the democracy's gone.
It's a kind of coup, you know, Tony.
Yeah, I do. I'm to be honest now, I've lost all respect in politics, because if I'm going to say to my lad who's 24 and people listening out there that in the next general election, whether you vote Liberal, Labour, Conservative or whatever, go ahead into the polling stations, put your cross on a mark, your vote might count, but then again it might not. What future have we got? There's no fight. I just feel sick, and that's from somebody who voted Remain, George.
Yeah, well, I'm very, very glad to hear that, Tony, because this now transcends not just left and right, but it transcends how you voted in the referendum. The issue is who rules this country. Is it the people, or is it the bewigged, or is it the corrupt liars in the House of Commons? Do they own us, or do we own them? Do we tell them what to do, or do they tell us what to do, Tony? That's the question.
Well, all I'm going to say before I get off, George, is I listen to your calls. I don't always agree, but on this one, you have nailed it 100% right. Politics don't come into it. It's just corruption. And to me, it just smells of something very, very, very murky.
Yeah, otherwise, why are they doing it? Why are they going to all this trouble if, as the Hansard Society fellow said, they've no intention of vetoing it? Why then go to all this trouble? Why then spend all this money? Why invest all this political capital? It's clear that there's something up. We might not yet be able to see the final shape of what comes next, but we are not stupid. We know that something is coming up. That was Tony in Goal, bringing to an end the first hour, but the good news is there are 2 more hours to go. Write down the new phone number, 0344 499 1000, or tweet me at George Galloway, or us at Talk Radio. It's Friday. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
A new kind of talk radio. We'll get you talking. Talk Radio.
0344 499 1000. That's the number to call the mother of all talk shows. And me, George Galloway. Are we about to be trumped? And are the walls of racism going to tumble down?
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite. He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
0344 499 1000. Are we going to sit on our hands and let idly pass by a kind of coup taking place in our country where judges are handing Parliament the power that the people thought they had? And what are the American people about to do on Tuesday? I can scarcely believe what I'm now seeing in front of my face. Call me 0344 499 1000.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Now, I've not been reading enough tweets, so let me read a few more. Rich Turner says a few more Tory resignations and May will be obliged to call a general election anyway. Corbyn is ready. I hope so. George, please help to correct this. It seems to me that these undemocratic remoaners will never accept that they lost and will try any devious delaying stunt to stop Brexit. Call in any friends or favours to put this right. Otherwise, we have been duped and cheated. And John Wren says the Democrats deserved Trump as president because they cheated the best candidate, Bernie Sanders. Amen, John Wren, amen. Let's go to New York and talk with Sam across the Atlantic. Sam, welcome.
How you doing, George?
How is it looking? It's 45-45 on the poll of polls. Clinton's double-digit lead that they were talking about last week has certainly dissipated, if not disappeared. How does it look to you?
Well, that's the general consensus here. Just a second ago, you read out a tweet that the Democrats deserve Trump because we missed on Sanders, and that's 100% true. Problem is, Clinton really needed the millennial votes, and the majority of millennials went with Bernie Sanders. And less than 50% are willing to vote for Hillary. Others will stay home, vote Jill Stein. But the tweet that you just read was 100% right. The Democrats and Clinton have no one to blame for this other than their own campaign.
Absolutely
When
correct.
you give us a person, and Bill Maher said condescendingly last week on the show that millennials are too lazy to do the education and learn about Clinton. No, we're the generation of the internet. We know all about her. We know she voted for the Iraq War, which, by my opinion, means you should already be disqualified. But it's not just that. It continues on. She votes for the Patriot Act, or she votes to intervene in Libya. She, lobbied for TPP 45 times, George, and then says, no, I was against it, only because Bernie Sanders pulled you against it.
She's a liar. Lies trip off her lips
100%.
with such ease. It's almost demonic to watch her deny things that we know are the truth.
100% correct. And then on top of that, our generation, we grew up with the Iraq War, which, we were told, oh, no, it's 9/11, Saddam did it. No. And then it's weapons of mass destruction, then it's democracy. And then she comes out in the year 2014 and then says, oh, yeah, it was a mistake. Republicans came out before you and said it was a mistake. And then you're saying, well, we should go into Syria. Great, let's go into World War III with Russia because, hey, why not? We have nothing else to do. But, to hell with the infrastructure and tell millennials, oh, free college, free health care is a pie-in-the-sky dream. I mean, for all the flaws you guys are dealing with in England, you should be thankful you have free college, free health care. I mean, this is stuff that we can't even get in this country.
We don't have free college, let me assure you. Thanks to Tony Blair, free education was abolished, even though he and all his cabinet members had enjoyed it. At my expense, by the way, because I never had any education. I left school at the first opportunity and went to work and paid tax so that Tony Blair and his chums could go to Oxford University entirely free and get a grant to enjoy it with. But no more, Sam, no more. But we do have a health service.
Yeah, well, that's something the biggest cause of bankruptcy in this country, George, is medical bankruptcy. People will go bankrupt trying to pay bills, which is, you tell anybody in other, modernized nation, hey, if your kid has cancer, well, prepare for bankruptcy because treating him will cause you to become poor. And it's a nightmare. And then we're told, oh, well, here's a candidate who, yeah, she'll do a little incremental change here and there, but hey, she's progressive. When? When was she progressive?
She has never been progressive, and the Wall Street speeches that WikiLeaks have been dumping for weeks on the media with virtually no take-up prove that she says one thing on Wall Street and one thing on Main Street, which is why Wall Street has thrown so many millions of dollars into her campaign chest.
Well, George, I'm sure Goldman Sachs gave her all that money because they care about her stance on birth control. It couldn't be a favor. It couldn't be a you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back notion that's existed in our political system. No, it's because they cared about her foreign policy ideas. Sure. If I may steal a quote from you, I have a bridge to sell you then.
Sam, as we say in Glasgow, yeah, right. Sam in New York, thanks very much for that wonderful call. Let's stay in the United States and talk to Heidi Harris, who is in Nevada in the United States and has a point of view on the presidential election. Heidi, are you there?
I am. How are you?
I'm good. It's wonderful to talk to you. I'm looking at the poll of polls. It looks neck and neck in the presidential race. What's your take on it?
Well, I'm hoping that Donald Trump pulls it out. Not that he was my first choice, but I like him better than her. And I think that the people who like him are being underpolled. I don't think they're being represented as well in the polls as she is. And I think that they're going to be very surprised Tuesday night when he becomes the next president.
Now, you're a host at AM 840 KXNT in Las Vegas. What's the stance of radio stations across the country? Is it the case that most radio stations are with Trump or with Clinton?
Well, I think when it comes to talk radio, the conservative kind of talk radio, a lot of my listeners love Donald Trump, even if he wasn't their first choice. And for a lot of people, he was their first choice because they felt that a lot of the Republicans who are currently in office have let them down and made them promises they haven't kept. And so they were willing to take a chance on somebody who'd never held elective office.
Well, people say the devil you know. They do know Hillary Clinton, but they do know that she's a devil. But it's a fair surmise on most people's part that Trump's a bit of a devil too.
Well, you know what? Jesus isn't running this year, so these are your choices. You've got, these two. It's funny because they both have very high unfavorables, as I'm sure you know. And so during most years, she would have no chance if it weren't for the fact that he's running. And in most years, he would have no chance if it weren't for the fact that she's running. That's what's so crazy about this election.
That it is, and it's the thing that most people, I must tell you, in the world can't understand. how such a great country, with all its achievements, all its power and wealth, has come up with these two as the final choice.
I know. That's what I keep saying. We've got over 300 million people, and this is what we come down to, these two. I mean, it's embarrassing. I'm not going to lie to you. It's embarrassing, George.
I mean, I know that Jesus isn't going to come back to run for president of the United States, but somebody who's at least not a devil.
I can't argue with you. Listen, I'm not happy about the choices. I'm not at all. But I think she's a modern-day Jezebel, and she's corrupt up to her eyeballs. And the only thing that consoles me is maybe if Donald Trump becomes the president, he'll surround himself with people who know more about foreign policy than he does and make the right decisions based on that. Because any successful executive is going to do that. They're going to take advice from people and apply that. So I'm hoping Donald Trump will do that. That's all I can say.
All right. Now, you're in the home of gambling. If you were, and I'm sure you're not, a gambling woman, what would your money be on Tuesday's result?
I would be on Donald Trump winning. But then I thought Mitt Romney would win. So I'm no expert on this. But I really do think that Donald Trump's going to pull this out because more and more people are very suspicious of her. And with the polls being this tight for a woman who's been in public service, whatever you want to call it, for 30 years, it's shocking that the polls are this tight. So that tells me there's a huge group of people who are going to vote for Donald Trump that Hillary's people are not expecting.
They've been in private service, Heidi, not public service. Thank you very much, my dear, for coming on. It's great to hear your voice from Las Vegas, Radio AM 840 KXNT. Don't they have such wonderfully exotic titles to their radio stations? We're just plain old talk radio. And this is the mother of all talk shows with me, George Galloway. Now, the Black Prince says, is there any Western democratic system that isn't built on slavery and oppression to at least some extent? Listen, in my lifetime, a black person couldn't urinate in the same pot as a white person in Washington, D.C. There is nowhere in the world other than apartheid South Africa about which you could say that. The original Americans are this very minute in the state of North Dakota being tear-gassed and bludgeoned to try and defend their ancestral burial grounds from yet another pipeline being laid across it. The genocide of tens of millions of the original Americans, followed by slavery until the later part of the 19th century, followed by Jim Crow, segregation and apartheid? No, I'm afraid not. There is no comparator except apartheid South Africa. Coyote's Bar says, what are your thoughts on the Tory-looking demonstrators at the Russian embassy today and tit-for-tat at the UK embassy in Russia? I didn't know about that. I must look that up. Alison sent me a message by email. Take heed, your listeners have been warning you that Hillary Clinton will take us into World War III. You cannot claim every week that Trump is stark raving mad. Alison, not only can I do, and I will, because he is. Fanella says our clueless PM can't be left to make it up as she goes along. Sorry, George, but I welcome this obstruction. Goldilocks says Trump is no worse than previous American presidents. Bush Jr., Bush Sr., Reagan, no difference. And 10 Bob says, do you want UK to leave the single market? And if so, why? Well, if we don't leave the single market, there is no point in leaving the European Union at all. There is no point in soft Brexit. You'd be better to stay. There is no point in a soft Brexit because the Norway model of soft Brexit, which is the only one we know, means that you must continue to accept free movement of labour. That is to say, unlimited immigration from the 26 other countries of the European Union. And you must accept not British court decisions, but decisions made by foreign judges in a foreign country in Brussels. No thanks, 10 Bob, no thanks. Here's Ray in London. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, hello, George. A great show, as always.
Thanks.
I've just got a different spin on things. I think, yes, we want rid of this government, but at the moment, they're on 42%. If we had a general election tomorrow, we would have no time to deselect the 171 MPs who are committed to get rid of Corbyn. That means Labour would be split. In the north, 65% of Labour working voters are opposed to Brexit. The general election will be all about the EU, not about welfare, not about housing, not about miners. It will all be about EU. The Labour Party will be wiped out. We will have a Tory government more right-wing than we've ever seen in our lifetime, backed up by the new UKIP realigned in the north. It's a complete disaster, the concept of a general election. And this result of this court action is almost certainly going to box PMA into a corner where she has no choice but call a general election. And that, for those of us on the left, could be the disaster, because the best hope we have of delivering a fairer and more just society for everybody is with Corbyn and his policy agenda in number 10. And at the moment, we're in danger of losing something that we fought so hard and long to achieve.
Well, there are a number of layers to the argument that you have just made. The first is you're the first left-wing person living under a Tory government that's demanding no general election. I don't want a general election to get the Tories out. In fact, I'm campaigning to keep the Tories in until 2020, when Labour might have a chance of defeating them. You may or may not see the irony of that. Second, I've got bad news for you. The Labour MPs of whom you speak are not going to be deselected. And Jeremy Corbyn is not going to allow them to be deselected. This is a total illusion that you are living under, that Corbyn is going to allow you to deselect MPs that hate him. I'm afraid he doesn't have the iron in his soul to allow that. And thirdly, you are hopelessly misunderstanding what political forces are now at large. The Theresa May platform will have to be hard Brexit, which I incidentally support. But any party promising less than hard Brexit will get millions of votes, millions of them, from previously non-Labour voters who don't want to leave the European Union. And if they can choose between a soft Brexit platform advanced by Corbyn and a hard Brexit platform advanced by Theresa May, then, frankly, that's Corbyn's best chance to win. Not his worst chance, but his best chance. Fourthly, I think UKIP are collapsing in the north. In Burnley last night, their vote fell by more than 10%. In every by-election that's currently taking place, UKIP are collapsing. And you may have noticed that they're even collapsing on the floor of the European Parliament building, being punched or shoved or bumped into, allegedly, by each other. They don't have a leader. Their leadership election campaign has become a farce. And fifthly, it's entirely contradictory for you to say that UKIP are going to make hay, but Theresa May is going to gain. Because if UKIP are to be rising, they must rise at the expense not just of the Labour Party, but of the Conservative Party. Ray, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I wish you were right, George, but I see it so differently. I want Corbyn. I'm a Corbynist through and through. But I think it's very, very difficult for many people on the left to be campaigning. I live in Lewisham. We have two of our Labour MPs opposed Corbyn on the Yemen vote. They've done whatever they can to undermine Corbyn at everything.
They're absolute wretches, Ray. But do you think that Corbyn's going to allow you to deselect them? I'm here to tell you right now, remember you heard it here, you have no chance of deselecting them. Corbyn will not allow it. McDonnell will not allow it.
Then we will vote Green. We won't be in a position to vote for Corbyn. We will not vote.
That contradicts everything you've just said, mate.
I know.
That contradicts everything that you have just said.
But a Labour MP that's opposed to Corbyn is so different to a Tory. That is, to me, in my view,
well, I
the
agree
reality.
With you. I agree with you. You better call up Jeremy Corbyn, not me. Ray, thanks for the call. Let me take a break for some capitalist messages.
Call me have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Okay, it's a new number, remember, 0344 499 1000. You call us at the national rate. I think we still call you back. Yes, we do. And you'll be on the University of the Airwaves. Megalon says May doesn't really want Brexit, as didn't Boris. And Adam Eccles says, I voted to Remain, and if Remain won and people tried to overturn it, I'd be very angry. Asa says, free movement and mass immigration was main issue for 90%, so we must leave the single market to control this. Look, this so-called Norway model requires us to continue to accept free movement of labour from the other 26 members of the European Union, and continues to subject us to decisions of courts in Europe rather than in Britain. Now, whether you like it or not, the overwhelming majority of working class people do not agree to the continuation of the capitalist's wet dream, which is free movement of labour. In a capitalist society, an increase in the supply of labour means a decrease in the price of labour, and not just its price, its availability, and the terms and conditions on which labour is engaged. That is just basic capitalist economics. And most working class people, not middle and upper middle class people, working class people, and not just in the north, but in Wales and in the south west of the country and around parts of London, like Dagenham, like the parts of Essex that voted heavily against remaining in the European Union, will not accept that. That's what they mean by soft Brexit. A continuation, like Norway, of a form of association with the European Union which requires us to allow free movement and subjects us to the decisions of the European Court. Now, you can celebrate immigration as much as you like. You can love the multicultural nature of our country as much as you like, as I myself do. But these are the hard electoral, political, and economic facts. So, that's what May will have to campaign in the general election for. But that leaves 16 million people who voted to remain, as well as some of those who voted to leave, who don't want the hardest form of Brexit. That's why I say a soft Brexit platform gives Corbyn the only chance that he has of winning a general election. Martin's in Doncaster. Let's hear from him.
Hello, George.
Go ahead, Martin.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted that you've elucidated that reality that people, especially the establishment, don't want people to wake up to about immigration and its effect on the cost of labour. Because working class people have realised that, and that's why they voted for Brexit, isn't it, in many cases?
Exactly so.
And I think we're witnessing one of the most gigantic and huge conspiracies ever seen in this country. When Parliament resumed, I think we saw a microcosm of it in the Labour coup. I think it was a dress rehearsal for what's happening now, actually, because many of the same people are involved. And these discredited people, such as Nick Clegg, who has reduced the size of his party to the context of a people carrier, has the audacity to come out, and try and talk down and try and rerun the referendum campaign. It's absolutely astonishing. Here's a guy who was formed and shaped in the Fulcrum of Europe by Leon Britton et al. And he's also been discredited with his performance in the 2010 election. Not only him, these Labour MPs like Ed Miliband, who is in my own town, Doncaster voted 69% against Brexit, he immediately turns around, is impervious and immune to the way the people think. It's just astonishing.
I'm afraid his connection to Doncaster is somewhat fleeting,
Absolutely.
somewhat fleeting, and somewhat flimsy.
Absolutely, and that is the legacy, isn't it, of Blair's Labour?
Yep.
Parachuting people from the south, middle class people who have no connection, no understanding of these constituencies, and actually aren't interested, and also just want to defy and just undermine them. It's just bewildering and beyond belief, in my opinion.
You're absolutely right. Great call. Thanks, Martin, in Doncaster. Frank Kelly emails, I normally agree with you, but in this case, because I was lied to or misinformed, I made the wrong decision and voted for Brexit. And Kevin SMSs, when did the Westminster reprobates ever listen to the populace? Even at elections, you never see the bees. Bees being an abbreviation. Michael Brenya says, so now we don't respect the law. Strange days indeed. Let's all do as we please and rule by referendums. Well, the point is, Michael, you can't change the rule of a referendum after you've had it. If you tell people that this is a referendum and you, the people, will make the final decision, or to use the Prime Minister's words in introducing the bill, you, the British people, will have the final say. Final say. Not Parliament will make the final decision, not the courts will make the decision, but you, the people, will have the final say. You can't change that now, Michael. Sorry.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Now, we've got Daniel Rachel, author of Walls Come Tumbling Down. And after 10 o'clock, Ian Lee is here again with his unique style of late-night talk. And this week on The Motor Show, Aston Martin Lagonda's Marek Reichman and Rio Paralympic gold medal winner John Allen Butterworth join Andy, Jay and Rebecca Jones. Plus, Busted pop in for a chat about their passion for cars. All that and more from 3 p.m. tomorrow on Talk Radio. Now, Daniel Rachel is a very cool and clever young man, and he's written a fantastic book called Walls Come Tumbling Down. I suspect that that's an optimistic title, because I don't think the walls that we're about to talk about have come tumbling down. But there is no doubt that just like that trumpet which brought the walls of Jericho down, music, musical instruments and voices and a social movement around them called the Anti-Racist, Anti-Nazi League, Rock Against Racism, all these phenomena played a vital part in stopping, so far, the development of the kind of mass fascist formations in Britain that exist in the European Union countries in such dangerous profusion. And Daniel, in his book, has charted how that great movement, one of the greatest movements since the 1930s, in the movement against fascism in Spain, was built. The walls didn't come entirely down, but we have so far escaped the worst form of organized racist fascist politics. And he joins me now to talk about the book. Daniel, great to see you again. Tell us, first of all, how the book is doing, who publishes it, and what its basic premise is.
Oh, well, it's a very beautiful book that's published by Picador, and they've gone to town on it, which is a very good thing. It's thick, it's kind of about 600 pages, but a good 200 of those are photographs and illustrations from the period. So, pictorially,
it is a very beautiful product.
Yeah. So all it's a very all-round experience, but that's. Casing some very serious stuff alongside some great and funny anecdotes. There's a real mix in there, and the premise of the book is very simple. It's the music and politics of Rock Against Racism, Two Tone and Red Wedge, and it's the period 1976 to 1992. It's a 16-year period, and it traces the musicians of the day, the activists of the day, the politicians, and it brings them all together. So on one hand, you might be hearing the voice of Neil Kinnock, and then you're hearing somebody from Crass, and then you're hearing Jerry Dammons from the Specials, and so it goes. And also very many people whose names you perhaps have never heard of, or you would pass by on the street without recognizing. And yet it's those people who tell extraordinary stories.
It was using music to assemble audiences, to see on the stage multiracial bands, multiracialism in practice.
Yeah, I mean, Rock Against Racism had an incredibly fantastic idea, and it was very simple. And it was this: to put on a bill where you first had a punk band, which would be white, followed by a reggae band, which would be black musicians. And then they said both those bands have to come together at the end of the evening and perform on stage doing a song. Now, that was extraordinary in 1976, 77, 78. It hadn't been seen. Sure, there'd been white musicians with black people within the band, and there'd been the occasional multiracial outfits. But this was something that was important because of what was happening politically and socially in the United Kingdom at this very moment. And that was the rise of the National Front, who were polling extraordinarily high in local elections in places like Leicester, in the east of London. And they were saying that at the next general election, they were going to put a candidate in every single constituency across the United Kingdom. That's some going. And so culturally, musicians turned around and said, we have an answer to this, and it is to mobilise the youth of a whole generation on an anti-racist agenda. And I guess the story that I follow, that starts with an event with Eric Clapton and paints a picture of a racist mid-70s Britain, ends with Nelson Mandela on stage at Wembley, fist aloft because he's free. South Africa is about to become rid of apartheid, and in front of him in Wembley Stadium, and billions of people watching TV are calling out because they are anti-racist. It's become hip to be anti-racist. That wasn't the case in the mid-70s.
Well, you talk as beautifully as you write, and as a summary of the book, that's pretty near perfect. But there's a reason why you started with an Eric Clapton concert, because, and I'm as great an admirer of Eric Clapton's guitar playing as anyone alive.
Yeah.
But he went through a period, as did, I'm sorry to say, the recently departed David Bowie, in which they were giving expression from the stage of some of the kind of ideas that the National Front were peddling on the political level.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because Eric Clapton was loved, for Cream, for Derek and the Dominoes. I loved him because he played the guitar solo in While My Guitar Gently Weeps, the Beatles' great track off the White Album written by George Harrison. But in August of 76, he was at the Birmingham Odeon on tour. Van Morrison was a special guest. And he repeatedly made to the audience outrageous racist comments. He asked the audience who wasn't white to put up their hand. Having engaged those people, he then told them that they needed to go back to their own country. Now, he was drunk that night, and you may think he only said this comment once, but in fact, he repeatedly made it over the evening. And there were witnesses to this, not only an article in Sounds, a reporter, Dave Wakeling, who had gone to form The Beat, was down the front. The renowned photographer David Corio was there. And Clapton continually made these comments over the evening. He then went on to repeat very similar remarks, backing Enoch Powell, who we know in 1968 had made the inflammatory Rivers of Blood speech. But you rightly say that this was a climate where rock musicians were flirting with Nazism. David Bowie had a Nazi collection, a memorabilia collection. He was stopped on a train, in fact, as he crossed over the Russian border, and with his memorabilia collection. He arrived at Victoria Station on his return to the UK, and he was seen in an open-top limousine, apparently snapped by Chalky Davis, giving what looked like a Sieg Heil, arm aloft, hand out straight.
And didn't he say that Hitler was the first rock star?
First rock and roll superstar was Adolf Hitler. But, you know, the picture was doctored by the enemy, and Chalky Davis is very clear about that. And when Bowie was questioned about his potential Nazi leanings, he categorically denied it. He spoke out at every opportunity and apologised. And that is significant because Eric Clapton did not do that and has subsequently never done that. And he has been repeatedly asked. Jerry Dammers asked him at a Nelson Mandela concert, perhaps this is your opportunity to apologise. And he said to Dammers, don't believe all that you read.
Wow. I'm sorry, actually, to hear in such detail those stories. I'm glad you said it, but I'm sorry. I feel sorry in my heart about that. So they were the villains. Who were the heroes?
Well, the hero initially is a person called Red Saunders, who's an activist and a real character. He's very funny to read, and he wrote a letter to all of the music papers castigating Eric Clapton, and he ended up with a fantastic line in his letter which said, we need a rank and file movement to get rid of the racist poison in rock. Write to this P.O. Box address, and people did in their hundreds. And from those letters, Rock Against Racism formed. Satellite Rock Against Racism groups grew around the country. By 1977, the Anti-Nazi League, of which you will remember, had formed, and in many ways, Rock Against Racism became the cultural wing of the Anti-Nazi League. And suddenly, the country saw mass carnivals in cities, Edinburgh, Cardiff, Southampton, but Manchester. But the big one was undoubtedly in 1978, April, in East London, Victoria Park, with the Clash, Steel Pulse, Tom Robinson, X-Ray Specs, and 80,000 people, not pogoing on one hand, then grooving to reggae, but backing minority groups. And it wasn't just racism, it was anything that was a minority. So when Tom Robinson sang on stage, Sing If You're Glad to Be Gay, an audience sang with him. And the one young chap who was at the gig was Billy Bragg. And at first he was thinking, what's all this about gay people? And people were snogging next to him, men were snogging. And he suddenly realised that this was going to be about minorities uniting against fascists.
Fantastic story. We'll talk more about it. I've got a couple of quite serious questions to ask you, but I need a break for some capitalist messages.
Listener comrades of the world, unite! The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Well, we're getting into the mood here because we're with Daniel Rachel, who's the author of Walls Come Tumbling Down, the story of Rock Against Racism, and Two Tone and Red Wedge, covering a 16-year period in which organised fascism in Britain was defeated. Daniel is not just a great writer, as you're already discovering, he's a great talker too. Let's see if Rashid, who's on the line, can match it. Rashid, welcome.
George, am I on the mother of all talk shows?
You're on the mother of all talk shows. You're right.
Yes.
You are legend. You are legend. Go ahead, my friend.
Hey, George, I'm going to get that book. That book sounds great.
It's a fantastic book. And it's not just beautifully written. As Daniel said, it's beautifully encased in with a very heavyweight publisher, Picador. Beautiful illustrations, real quality. Go ahead, Rashid.
Lots of pictures. That's good for me.
Yeah.
George, what I was going to say, there's no, apart from rap nowadays, there's no real other genres talking about racism and things like that. And we need other genres of music like rock again, like, I don't know, pop are not going to do it, but to talk about these things. But what I wanted to talk about was racism in Tunisia. I don't know if you've ever come across it or heard any articles or any news things about it. I saw a very, very disturbing program on Al Jazeera, Witness, about the racism today, 2016. And in the South, they say it's almost apartheid because a couple, a black Arab and what they're calling white Arabs, but they're like, the standard Arabs,
married, and they met on a school bus when they were teenagers. And from that day, the whole town was against the marriage. And what they decided to do was segregate the buses now. The black Arabs will go to school, the children will go to school on black buses, and the white, so-called white Arabs will go to school on white buses. And it's just disgusting. And they put a hidden camera upon a black person in the capital, and everybody, a lot of people were abusing him, saying, "Hey, you stink, get away from me, you black this, you black." It's disgusting. Nowadays, 2016.
Well, I'm very shocked to hear that. It's not the Tunisia that most of us come across, but of course we stick to the coast mainly, to the holiday resorts and to Tunis itself. I'm very disturbed to hear that. If anyone's got
Have a look at it, George.
any further
particulars, we need to do something about these things. It's terrible.
Okay, unfortunately, my writ doesn't run in Tunisia. I'm not very well placed to affect that. But I'm glad you brought it up, Rashid. Thanks for doing so, even if it's slightly off topic. But he did, Daniel, make a point that I just made to you in the break, and I'd like to ask you on air. Isn't there a need for another wave? Because whilst organised fascism shows no signs of resurrecting in Britain, only a fool would say that racism is dead and that racism no longer exists. And so if there's a need for a new wave, is there a will for a new wave amongst today's musical performers?
Well, it's an enormous question, and of course there definitely is a will, because all people of sound mind are anti-fascist and anti-racist. The question becomes, who is prepared to make a stand? And obviously in the period of my book, people did make a stand, and they put their careers online despite what record companies and what managers may have said to the contrary. They made their stand and they wrote it in their lyrics and they spoke about it in their interviews, and it was as much an importance as what their whole life as a musician was. Today, Rashid's right that it largely comes out of rap, it comes out of grime, but it doesn't seem to come from mainstream pop. And I would perhaps draw on an argument that Tracy Thorn has just put forward in the New Statesman, and she suggests that because of social media, an artist is very wary of making any form of stand for the fear of what trolling may come back at them, and that can, we all know the hatred that can be generated on Twitter and on Facebook, and perhaps musicians and cultural artists are nervous for that reason. But we can't repeat what has happened in previous generations, because socially and politically every generation is different. But it has to come in a different way, and where that will come from, I don't know. But there's just in Margate at the moment, there's a White Lives Matter group, which has made another group form called Margate Rock Against Racism. So an instantaneous response. I'm not too sure what response that is beyond a march and a rally, but it means that people on the street are not going to accept racism in their homes and their cities.
Now, I've alluded, let me be explicit, in countries like France, to a lesser extent like Italy, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, there is organised either fascism or neo-fascism. Was there a response on the European mainland? Was there a response in North America?
Yeah.
Where fascists use music? I've seen them, documentaries about them, this kind of white power music. Was there a response in North America, in Europe, to fascism in the period that you discuss in your book?
Yeah, there absolutely was, and it was very, very exciting, because one of the things that I was given was the archive of Rock Against Racism, and in that was every single letter that had ever been written. And it's a glorious thing to look back at handwritten letters, and from 40 years ago and 30 years ago. But within that was a massive pile labelled international. And literally it's as you would expect to find within. And there were letters from as far away as you can imagine, Australia, Japan, and groups were forming in those places, using. I mean, this was the great thing about Rock Against Racism. Nobody owned it. It was named by the central grouping that had originally formed around Red Saunds's letter, but then it was, we don't have any rules. Take it, use it, but in the spirit in which we form. So in Belgium, they had Rock Against Racism carnivals and concerts. The famous Misty and Roots reggae album was recorded live at one of those at what was called the County Eurovision. Attila the Stockbroker was involved in that gig, and the following day or week there was an anti-racist Rock Against Racism demonstration in the main city that he describes in the book. In America, I've seen the badge for New York's Rock Against Racism, and those concerts still continue to this day. It's such an identifiable idea, and so simple an idea. Stand on a stage, play music, and bring together black and white bands and be anti-racist. How fantastic is that?
Indeed so. Now, you talked about some of the heroes earlier. Have any of them stayed with the project, stayed with the program? I mean, I know people in the specials, for example, Jerry in particular, and they have never changed their political stripe. But what I'm thinking of, maybe unfair, quite a lot of the anti-Thatcher stand-up comedians went on to become multi-millionaires and have ended up in quite a different political place. Did that happen to any of the main players in the Rock Against Racism movement?
Well, one of the exciting things I found by meeting, I mean, I talked to over 100 people, and I've described the kinds of people I met, and there was a burning passion in virtually every single person that I talked to, not only about that period, but they hold the passion still now and are still active now. I mean, the great example, I guess, would be the concert for Corbyn that's happening in Brighton in December, and headlined by a supergroup of Paul Weller and what's his name, shipbuilder Robert Wyatt. They're doing a group together. Now, Robert Wyatt, as we know, wrote, covered the Elvis Costello and Clive Langer song Shipbuilding, about the contradictions of what was happening in the Falklands War. And Paul Weller was the architect alongside Billy Bragg and Anna Joy David of Red Wedge. Now, Paul's got back into politics because
he's been unequivocal. I saw him the other day in Portobello Road.
Oh, yeah.
And Robert Wyatt has been on my television show, and I'm in close touch with him.
Did you talk to Paul about the event?
No, I didn't.
Right.
It was just a brief pass by. But it's fantastic that he's back in politics, because he's not only such an iconic figure, he is a link to this very period that we're talking about.
And the great thing about Paul's involvement in Red Wedge was, I mean, just very briefly, Red Wedge was an independent, autonomous alliance of people that have come through punk, either directly like Paul or influenced like Billy, bringing together all the number one artists and great artists of the time, Madness, the Communards, and they went and said, we are all against Margaret Thatcher, and we need her out at the next general election. The best way to do that is to get behind the Labour Party. They weren't saying they were wholeheartedly in support of the Labour Party. They were definitely for them, but not of them. And they used what the Labour Party offered them, which was a room at the headquarters. But from day one, Paul said to everybody, I am suspicious of whether we are being used, and we have to think about that in everything we do. And Billy says he maintained that all the way through it. But the great thing was that it didn't deter him from making a stand for something that he believed in, which was the deindustrialization of this country, and a belief in young people, a belief that there didn't have to be the high levels of unemployment, a belief that youth could start at their own projects with fanzines, or money could be injected into, youth centres. Paul did all those kind of great things, but used his music as a way to back it all, which is very exciting.
Very exciting indeed. And anyone who buys this book, or even borrows it, will not be disappointed. It is an exciting wonderful book by a great new writer, Daniel Rachel, author of Walls Come Tumbling Down, published by Picador. It's the mother of all talk shows, with me, George Galloway, on Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
A new kind of talk radio. We'll get you talking. Talk Radio.
0344 499 1000. That's the number to call to join the great debate in this university of the airwaves that is the mother of all talk shows.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Listener comrades of the world, unite! He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
0344 499 1000. That's the number to call to join in. We're discussing Brexit and the High Court decision yesterday to throw a gigantic judicial spanner in the works of the implementation of the British people's decision in the EU referendum. We're talking about racism, fascism, and how the rock and rollers responded to it, and wondering where the next wave of that response will come from. And of course, as the polls become officially neck and neck in the United States, 45-45 between the devil and the devil, we're asking what happens next on Tuesday in the United States.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Now, Chris Darlaston tweets, I went to see the specials last night, and their two-tone anti-racist message is as relevant today as in 1979. Tegwin Half says, yes, we do need a new wave of anti-racist music. I don't think I know of any new music which is anti-racist. We need more rock against racism concerts. Alan Ingle says Bowie's flirtation with fascism was as a result of being, quote, out of mind, totally, completely crazed. Shap Adamant says, re the US election choice, Democrat voters never had a real choice. Hillary Clinton was prepared to do, say, anything to bury Bernie. More fool him for allowing himself to be buried, if you ask me. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. We are here, says I.O. Tigernich. Forgive me if I mispronounced that. She's all the world's got right now. You prefer a Trump presidency? Lesser of two evils, says Joe Alessi. Well, as I've said here many times before, the lesser of two evils is still evil. And going for the lesser of two evils merely encourages more evil, because it means that the evildoer can get as evil as he likes, and as long as his rival is only marginally less evil, they'll be the lesser of two evils. Do you get my point, Joe? I'm with Dr. Jill Stein and have been from the beginning, head and shoulders above the other candidates. But that's not the view of my next guest, I think. Bill Keeler, morning show host at WIBX in New York, USA, and I'm glad to say Bill joins us now. Bill, how's it looking?
Well, I got to tell you, it's tight. And since the FBI announcement came last week, we've just been watching the polls, and things have really tightened up. Not only when it comes to the popular vote, but the Electoral College, which of course is the all-important avenue that you're going to have to go down in order to see victory. And it's tight right now, almost a dead heat.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the poll of polls now, and it's 45-45, actually a dead heat, because, of course, there are other candidates in the race, though they are way off the map behind. But 45-45 in the popular vote. But in the so-called swing states, Trump is beginning to catch up to reach Clinton's position and, in some cases, overhaul it. And there's still a few days to go. So the Democrats, we have a saying here, Bill, squeaky bum time. It must be squeaky bum time. They must be shifting uneasily in their chairs in the Democratic National Committee.
Oh, I think that is definitely the case. There is nothing is in the bag here, and it's very interesting. We just heard word that Trump has some unique, and I didn't get the full story yet, but there's some unique form of advertising that Trump is spending millions on here for the final weekend, and of course the Democrats are doing the same. Obviously, there must be somebody out there they feel at this point they still can sway. And they're going to spend a lot of money over the course of this weekend and into Monday in order to do it. So, but what do they do? A lot of it has to be really selling Hillary as someone who isn't the lesser of two evils, somebody who, as the Democrats will say, is probably one of the most qualified candidates in history, at least in modern history in the United States, to run for president. That's the message they have to sell. And Trump just keeps banging the drum that she is crooked and that there's an investigation on, and of course, inevitably she's going to be indicted. Now, that hasn't been proven, but as long as Trump says it, everybody in his right side certainly believe it.
And it's not just the emails, Bill. In the London Times today, there's a very significant article that the feds have been investigating her charity over 12 months. And that charges may well be recommended on that front too.
Well, that at this point is something that Fox News came out with a story earlier in the week that was they had to back away from because they said that it's pretty much inevitable there will be an indictment. Well, that turns out to be not true. It does seem, however, that the FBI, within the FBI, we're hearing a lot about the fact that there's disagreement. Whether or not they should have come out in the open last week on Hillary Clinton, and disagreement that any of this stuff should have made it to the forefront before the election. So I'm not sure that there's that an indictment is inevitable, but I got to tell you, does it really matter? Because it's out there, and it's out there the weekend before. It's real trouble for Hillary Clinton.
Now, we were talking earlier to another radio host from Las Vegas. She's backing Trump. But she agreed with me that Clinton is not just the worst candidate the Democrats could have chosen, notwithstanding the experience point that you make, but that Trump is also the worst that the Republicans could have chosen, and that any other Republican could have beaten Clinton perhaps easily, and any other Democrat could have beaten Trump. So I ask you the same question I asked her. How is it that a great country like the United States, with all its talent, all its achievements, all its power and wealth, has come up with arguably the two least popular people in the country to run against each other?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I probably have to agree. Trump, I find personally, as being a dangerous candidate. Hillary Clinton has a lot out there. There's a lot of baggage that she's carrying, some of which, by the way, her campaign, when she initially began to run, knew nothing about. They didn't know about the server. They didn't know there was going to be something on the Clinton Foundation. So a lot of this stuff has come as a surprise. But you do hear things like, boy, if they'd have made the decision 8 months ago, 10 months ago, to bring Biden into the race, things would be a lot different. So I agree. Probably at the very least, in terms of perception, the two worst candidates you could have running. So how do we, the United States, get here? I'm baffled. I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Well, it's very honest of you. Let me ask one last, if I may, Bill. What does all this mean for the other races that are taking place? For, I think there's 26 governorships up for grabs. There's the Senate, there's the House. How is this tightening race going to impact on that?
Well, I think that what we have learned, it seems that the FBI announcement last week, by the way, has completely overshadowed any of the Trump stories with the the sexual assaults or, whether that's true or not. But it has affected, which is very, very important here, the races in the House. And I'm pretty confident that the Democrats or the Republicans will hold on to the House. The Senate is now in question. And it seemed very, very likely that Democrats would retain or regain control of the Senate. I don't think that's the case now. I think there's some very, very tight races. And again, this is up for grabs. I truly believe not only in the House and Senate, but also in the presidency. We may not know come Wednesday morning who the president of the United States is, and in some of these down ballot races, who your next congressman is.
Bill, you've been a gentleman and a scholar. Thanks for joining us. Bill Keeler, morning show host at WIBX Radio in New York in the United States. What a fascinating cliffhanger this is all turning out to be. Our sage, John Le Boutillier, could not be with us this evening because he's playing baseball. 3 hours of baseball. Now, I don't know what age John is. I rather formed the view that he was my age. And trust me, I couldn't play 3 hours of baseball. Mind you, there's a lot of standing around in baseball, isn't there? You're only in action every now and again. But we definitely will speak to John next Friday to look back at this result. The delightfully named and delightful person she is, Strawberry Shortcake, says, can you see the Parliamentary Labour Party letting him, she means Corbyn, deliver hard Brexit? They want Remain. Never mind soft Brexit. They'll never campaign for it. You've missed my point, Strawberry. My point is that Corbyn will campaign for a soft Brexit. And moreover, that's the only chance he has of being elected as Prime Minister. David Scott says, should Blair have deselected Corbyn? What, like he did me, you mean? Marie21 says, Theresa May is a bit creepy. I think it's the way she walks, creeping into number 10. Something about her I don't like. And James Taylor says, let's just get behind Corbyn whichever way we can. Soft or hard Brexit, I don't care. Just get Jezza in power. Adam Eccles again says, do you think companies will leave the UK like they said they will when we leave the single market? Well, there's no reason why leaving the European Union necessarily needs to affect free trade between us and members of the European Union. I've said here before, Adam, they sell us much more than we sell them. If they put tariffs on our goods, we'll put tariffs on theirs. If you think that anybody is more nervous in all this than the German motor manufacturers, you'd be wrong. There is no reason why leaving the European Union means that we should not have free trade with members of the European Union. And I believe that we will reach a collective deal on that. I believe that is up for negotiation. And if they don't put tariffs on us, we oughtn't to put tariffs on them. And that way, we leave the European Union, we regain control of all of our own affairs, and we don't suffer economic damage. On the contrary, we then have the entire world as our oyster. Now, if you're saying to me that the European Union, in order to vindictively react to a major country leaving the Union, is going to damage its own trade, its own business, well, that will hasten what I believe to be inevitable, which is major change in the European Union, major change in the relationships within it, major change in relation to its single currency, which is not working and can't work because you cannot synchronize the economies of highly developed industrial powerhouses like Germany and poor countries like Greece, like Portugal, like Spain. So I believe major change, a complete rewriting of the European Union's internal and external relationships is underway and is going to be expedited by our leaving of the European Union. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
We're competing in a rigged election. It's a rigged election, folks.
She shouldn't be allowed to run. She should never have been allowed to run for the presidency. I say it's rigged.
Every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him. The FBI conducted a year-long investigation into my emails. They concluded there was no case. He said the FBI was rigged. Trump University gets sued for fraud and racketeering. He claims the court system and the federal judge is rigged against him. There was even a time when he didn't get an Emmy for his TV program 3 years in a row, and he started tweeting that the Emmys were rigged.
Should have gotten it.
This is a mindset. This is how Donald thinks. And it's funny, but it's also really troubling.
So troubling that she and Bill Clinton accepted money from Donald Trump to attend his wedding. I don't know what that says about them. Frankly, I don't know what it says about him, that he's prepared to pay the Clintons to come to his wedding. Now, Stephen Hunter asks, would Leave still win today? Or is it really too close to call? Well, I don't have a crystal ball, Stephen, but I do have the book in which I predicted the outcome of the EU referendum to the very percentage point, as indeed I did the Scottish referendum before it. Aren't they lucky I don't do the national lottery? At least not yet. Let me talk to my old adversary up in Liverpool, Mark, on Donald Trump. Mark, welcome back, son.
Hello, George. How you doing, mate?
I'm great, mate. Good to hear from you. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Listen, mate, I've just got to say something because I was fuming at first, but now I'm just disappointed in you. So, listen, I want to say something about the referendum and Brexit, please. And I'm so disappointed in you, mate. I've got to say it.
You're always disappointed in me. Don't pretend that this is something new. You're always disappointed in me. Go ahead.
Yeah, I am, mate, because I rate you and you know that. But listen, let's get it right. And for people telling us what we think, I totally accept that we voted out. Totally accepted the idea. But for the idea that our local MPs can't go and voice the concerns is absurd. Especially when 48% voted to remain. Now, if it was 75-25, I'd have to cut my losses and accept it. But don't forget, whole cities voted to remain. Liverpool voted to remain.
42% of Liverpool voted to leave.
Well, it doesn't matter. Not enough. From areas, right? For areas.
So it's a movable feast. Some majorities are conclusive, but other majorities are not.
Okay, forget that. Let's just look at the country then, right? Let's just get back to my main points. For areas that have benefited so vastly from the EU, right? You know that we've already told us it's going to stop in 2020. We know that. For not to be able to go and put our cases across that are worrying these communities. But more importantly, you think that we should be all right about handing this over to May? Boris, Hammond, Fox, Davey, are you out of your mind, George?
Unfortunately, you failed to grasp what I was saying. What type of Brexit, what our negotiating position is perfectly within the power, the purview of the Parliament and the MPs. But whether or not to press the Article 50 button has nothing to do with the MPs, and it has nothing to do with the courts. That matter was decided by more than 1.25 million votes in June of this year in the referendum.
Okay, George, well, I want to say this. I think it should be done for the people. Forget all that lark. It should be done for the people. Don't forget, this won't just be for the people who voted to remain. This is a chance for people who voted Brexit, who's got concerns, to go out into the public arena and see our MPs putting our voices across.
No, there's no reason for you to be disappointed, because I agree with all of that. Now, you said you wanted to talk about Trump. Do you still want to?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Go on.
Hey, do you know what, mate? I just can't believe what's happening. Now, I've got two close friends who are American, right? And for years we sparred off each other. I haven't been a big fan of Americans, but they turn out to me and say, "What you on about, Mark? Look at your record collection, Bob Dylan, Miles Davis, Larry Coryell, etc., etc." And I come back with you're just obnoxious and you're loud and you're too egocentric. And then what did he go and do? Put a man like this forward. The jaws have just hit the ground. They're so disappointed, mate, in their own compatriots. I feel sorry for America. I feel sorry for the rest of the world. And hating Clinton isn't a good enough reason to go to support Trump.
No, I don't support either of them. I wouldn't dream of voting for either Trump or Clinton.
No, I know you wouldn't. No, I know that, mate.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm not throwing that. Do you know what? I heard a woman the other day, right, in a Republican area, canvassing the head of the area. So I don't know what reporter it was. Went up to her and said, "Well, why aren't you voting for Hillary Clinton?" She said, "Because I'm not voting for someone like Barack Obama to carry on implementing Sharia law." What type are we dealing with here, George?
Oh, there's a lot of nutters in America. Unfortunately, they've got guns. Mark, thanks for the call. Here's Andrew in Helens Bay in the north of Ireland, where I'm headed to Newry, Derry and Belfast later this month. Andrew, go ahead.
All right, George. Pleasure to speak to you this evening. I hope you and John Le Batillier have a big house in New Zealand at the ready if the worst happens, because I'll probably join you there.
Yes.
Well,
the prices are relatively high. I'm not sure how big the house will be, but we'll accept visitors. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, it's really a lose-lose scenario. One is risking World War III with Russia, and the other one is literally a sexist, filthy sleazebag who could have his hand.
That's a hell of a way to talk about Bill Clinton.
Well, like both of them anyway, yeah. I do believe, scarily enough, that Trump may win it, because you'll remember, obviously, even back to Brexit, it was 12% going into the final day, and it won. And even you may remember, Quebec in 1995, when it was virtually guaranteed that Quebec would gain independence from Canada, and yet they stayed in Canada, albeit by the narrowest of margins. So you can never trust the polls, so you can't.
No, that's a fact. And don't forget that until about 2 o'clock in the morning, the bookies were giving only an 8%, I think it was, 8% chance of Brexit winning. So people are under-recording things like Brexit, things like Trump. They're under-recording it, either deliberately or systematically as a result of some flaw in their methodology, or, and I think this is more likely, just as people were once described as shy Tories, shy to say they were voting Tory, so there are shy Trumpers. As well they might be. I wouldn't like to admit to anyone that I was voting for Donald Trump, even if I was.
Oh, yeah, totally agree with you. But you see this historical relationship between Britain and the USA. I believe that whoever wins, we're going to have to distance ourselves from those two.
You bet.
Start looking further eastwards.
You bet.
To China and Russia.
The one redeeming feature of a Trump victory would be that the slavish obeisance to the United States by politicians in Britain and in Europe and elsewhere in the world would have to come to an end, because no one in their right mind would have as their default position that America is the leader, America is right, and that America must be followed. No one in their right mind. Andrew, I hope to see you. I'm in Newry, Belfast and Derry with my Blair film. I hope you'll come and see it and come up and talk to me. Thanks very much for the call. Let me take some more tweets while I can. Simon Brian Anderson says immigration also keeps house prices and rents at an unaffordable level. And Finlay sends an email, call me a traitor, but I like our legislation being accountable to the European Court and the Declaration of Human Rights. It's given us some of our best laws. Well, first of all, the Declaration of Human Rights was signed long before we joined the European Union. In fact, it predates the existence of the European Union, and no one, no right-thinking person, would want to resile from it. But as to liking our legislation being accountable to a court in a foreign country, unaccountable, unelected, well, Finlay, I just don't get that, I must tell you. Anyway, I need to take a quick break.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Charlie O says Bowie made a lot of money from Brits. Shame that he wanted to be buried in the United States. And Eva on the Run says Corbyn has to rid the Labour Party of the Red Tories, or they will undermine him in any election fight. Simon says if Corbyn doesn't deselect MPs, then I'm off somewhere else. The Labour Party no longer represents me. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. And Simon James says, I agree, Dr. Jill Stein is the only sane choice this year. Justin Hesford says, my understanding from Labour rules that any current MP has to face a trigger ballot if wishes to stand again. Your understanding, unfortunately, Justin, is faulty. Now, let's hear from another Justin in Wigan on Article 50. Go ahead, Justin.
Hi, George. Hi. It's the very same Justin.
Oh, fantastic. How's that for timing?
Yeah, great. That's the way I read it. And
no, it's not right. Only if they're affected by boundary changes.
Right. Well, I'm going to do some more research on that.
Yeah.
Anyhow. I printed off the whole bloody booklet on the Labour rules, and where it seems difficult to make sense of.
Well, of course, but rules are rules that don't apply when the Labour National Executive decides that they don't. And indeed, they went to court to establish that very principle. Jeremy Corbyn does not have the will, and the National Executive has no intention of allowing significant numbers of deselections to take place, I'm sorry to say.
Okay. So on to the Brexit, the Article 50 business and this court ruling. Are you still, after speaking with your expert earlier, of the opinion that we should be blaming the judges, that they've done something wrong legally to subvert the...
I absolutely am, and I hope that the Supreme Court overturns it.
Yeah.
Because the Article 50 is an inescapable, automatic consequence of the decision of the referendum. No one, not Parliament nor courts, has a right not to press that button. And yet it will now get bogged down in the House of Commons, but mainly in the House of Lords. And it will not be triggered for a very long time. And even if it is triggered, it may come with sufficient complications and obstacles as to render it inoperable. And there are plenty of powerful people in this country who want to have that situation brought about.
Well, how have you come to the opinion that the referendum has this automaticity to it, when the guy earlier seemed to be saying different?
Justin, what he was saying.
1 minute, let me finish.
But I just want to correct. I want to correct that point, then I'll let you back in. Whatever the guy earlier was saying, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that as you cannot leave the European Union without triggering Article 50, if the people in a binding referendum, which is what Cameron said it was when he introduced the bill, if the people vote to leave, then Article 50 is an automatic response to that decision. Otherwise, it wasn't a binding referendum, Justin.
Well, that's right. It wasn't a binding referendum because Cameron says doesn't give it a legal status.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. What the Prime Minister says in the House of Commons on behalf of the government has the force of government policy. So it was. There's no question about that. He said, and I'll quote, that the British people will have the final say. He didn't say subject to the courts, subject to the Parliament, the final say.
if I really, I'll have to research that, but I fancy it's wrong that the Prime Minister can just say something. He might have a slip of the tongue, and you're saying it becomes legally binding.
It does.
If Tony Blair advocates that we're going to stand side by side, whatever, with the Americans,
it means
he doesn't have that power.
Yes, he does. He has that power.
I'll have to check
he does have that power. You can check it with me, Justin. I was there for almost 30 years. He has the power to act on behalf of the monarch, to say that the decision of the referendum will be final. And if you accept that that's what he said, and that that's what he meant, and that that's what the House voted overwhelmingly for, then Article 50 is not in the power of the Parliament. It's an automatic consequence of the decision of the referendum.
Right, so, okay, I hear your point, and we disagree on that. And how are you meeting all the people who seem to take the contrary position, who seem to think that there's no automaticity in it? This referendum had an advisory status because it didn't explicitly say that it was a decision.
No, you see, this is just obfuscation by people who want to frustrate the decision of the electorate because they didn't like it. If you're seriously saying to me that you thought that gigantic Everest of a referendum that we just had was merely advisory, then either you're not looking closely enough, or frankly, you're dissembling, Justin.
Well, let's just be clear about one thing. I am for Brexit, okay? But on the morning of the vote, I wasn't jumping for glee because it was 52%, 48. I thought that wasn't a sufficient enough mandate. So, I'm not coming at it from a Ramona point of view.
In that case, it's the former of my options. You haven't looked closely enough. It wasn't advisory.
Right.
It was the final say. That's what the Prime Minister said in introducing it.
Right. Well, I'll have to research that myself, and
all right.
It's very interesting to
come back next week.
Say that. Yeah.
Come back
later,
next week,
George. Thanks a lot. Mate.
Okay, Justin. Thanks. Let me take a quick break.
Big Georgie Galloway's back on the radio. Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Can't wait for James Will's return, I must say. The maestro. Appointment to listen radio. Let me hear from Anna in Merseyside. Anna, welcome.
Hello, hi. Great show as always.
Thank you.
I was calling in because I thought it was interesting hearing your guest Daniel earlier. And in some ways, although these seem like separate topics, Brexit and the US election, and your guest you had on talking about his book, in some ways I think there is a sort of common thread that runs on both sides of the Atlantic at the moment that loosely links in with the guest you had earlier. And I think that despite, the spike in incidents that's happened post-Brexit, I like to think that a lot of progress has been made on racism and sexism in this country, and that I think on the whole there's a consensus of opinion that we don't tolerate outdated views anymore, thankfully. But what I don't like to see is feminism and anti-racism or anti-Semitism being used as a smokescreen by the liberal left, or chattering classes, if you like, and as a substitute for, I think, real politics of substance. And I think that we've seen a little of that on both sides of the Atlantic, I think. I mean, I'd like to make very, very clear, I'm no Trump supporter, and especially as a serious feminist, I'm not pro-Trump in any way. But on the other hand, I think, anyone who's read anything on the internet, if you followed the release of emails by Hillary Clinton, and just even without WikiLeaks, I think if you just look back over her policies and decision-making, her, just very recently, the destruction in Libya, for example, that she was very much involved with, I fail to see how you can call yourself feminist. And and support the likes of Hillary Clinton. For me, that's not real feminism, and I think that we've seen a lot of that on both sides of the Atlantic. We've had working class movements who have reacted against globalization, and I think that the media has been somewhat patronizing in terms of trying to come to terms with what both of those movements behind Corbyn and over across the Atlantic have been about.
Well, if there was a prize for the best call of the evening, you definitely would win it. That was a perfect summation. If you opposed the EU, you were a racist. If you're against potentially unlimited immigration into the labour supply in Britain, you are somehow a reactionary. If you oppose Hillary Clinton, you're a sexist. Well, you're too young to remember. We've had a woman leader in Britain before.
I'm not actually. I did love under Thatcher, and that's a perfect example.
It is. It is no step forward to get Margaret Thatcher into Downing Street. It was a disaster for women and men and children and the country, and nowhere more than in Liverpool. So the idea that one should support Clinton because she's a woman, or one should support the EU because people call you a racist if you don't, these are the default positions of the so-called liberals, small l, the liberal guardian class. And these are often people who benefit from the European Union. I myself, I'm a working class person, but I have a much higher standard of living than most working class people. And I benefit. I can get staff. I can get served. I can go and eat in places that suit me because of large-scale immigration. But if you are a worker in the north, in the southwest, in Wales, the EU has been a disaster for you. And the Brexit result was a revolt of the have-nots, the people who have not gained. And you're right to say the support for Trump, some of it is venal, vile, racist, sexist, no doubt. But it represents the same kind of rejection of the political class, of the political normalcy that tens, scores of millions of people have not benefited from, Anna.
Yeah, I mean, for myself in Liverpool, I mean, there's a lot of European social fund money that has, Liverpool has benefited from as a city. But I think for myself, I mean, there are things of grave concern. I think the increasing corporatization of the European Union with the likes of TTIP and CETA and these trade deals where you're looking at, UK sovereignty being undermined, and I think it's that much more difficult to protest. I mean, I think countless people across Europe signed petitions over TTIP because our own elected MEPs couldn't get access to the draft document. And it was only after people across Europe signed petitions that our elected MEPs were finally allowed to look at draft documents of this trade deal. And even then, their mobile phones were removed from them. They couldn't take anything in to record or make notes. And I would imagine that that's a fairly complex document. There's no way you can, take a glance through that without, being able to make notes on it or, photograph it in some way so that you have to go into a specific room and things like your mobile phone are removed from you. I mean, that's what I've read. So I think there are concerns, both as you were saying earlier in the programme, I think, when people were talking about Brexit, there are people across the left and the right for different reasons, I think, who we have more in common, I think, over these issues. And especially, you look at the headlines that we had and the reaction of certain sections of the media regarding, I don't remember which paper it was, but the headline, the rather dubious headline about he's openly gay Olympic fencer, and the liberal media jumped on this. But what I find offensive is that they have not jumped on the anti-democratic nature
exactly
of this, which we likewise saw with the actions of the NEC and Corbyn and what happened there.
Exactly. And I've got to stop because I've got a lot of people in the queue. Don't be a stranger. Call me again. I really liked talking to you. It was an excellent call. Let me hear from John in Glasgow. John.
Good evening, George.
Evening.
Judging from the US news channels and the opinion polls, we may only be days away from an extraordinary rendition flight on Air Force One landing at Glasgow Prestwick Airport to bring President Donald Trump to Scotland. We will have a comedic moment that will rival the reception committee that Alex Salmond arranged for the Chinese pandas arriving at Edinburgh Airport on their way to Edinburgh Zoo. I mean, how many chances does an organisation need, and a First Minister and a party need? I mean, they continually lead the Scots to defeat on the wrong side of arguments, left, right and centre. The track record makes Bonnie Prince Charlie and the Jacobites look like a success story.
Brilliant, John. I'm stopping you there because your call could not get better. Fantastic. Let's talk to Vivian in Nottingham. Vivian, welcome.
Hello, George. Good evening.
Good evening to you, sir.
George, big fan of what you're trying to do, mate. Big fan of what you're trying to do. George, this is a quick 2 points. Do you think that Trump was selected because they thought he would be basically a walkover, pushover, someone of no substance to contend for the presidency? So,
no, he won the nomination after a very ferocious fight. And the ruling class in America do not want Donald Trump at all. The idea that this is some kind of conspiracy, I mean, frankly, I'm not sure I'd put money on him being healthy for very much longer. So the ruling class does not want Trump. The ruling class is entirely behind Hillary Clinton. All the money is behind Hillary Clinton. All the military-industrial complex, for very good reason, is behind Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton, yeah. Because one thing I've noticed in the past couple of years with all the presidents, that I've not seen a president that I've been voted in via popular vote in a long time in the United States, George.
Well, I mean,
that's why I'm putting my money on Hillary to win.
Well, the argument might not be settled on Wednesday morning. I'm hoping that it is because I'm making a TV program in the middle of the night. But it's quite possible that just like George Bush versus Al Gore, it may be some days before we know who the next president of the United States is. Vivian, thanks for the call. Don't be a stranger. Here's Robert in London, probably the last call of the evening. Go ahead, Robert.
Hello, George. Yes, just going to say, you're a football fan. You've probably seen the furor about this Poppy issue during the week.
Yes.
Yes. So it's just, I want to know your views on this. I find it quite hypocritical, the fact that everyone's saying, "Oh, you have to wear a poppy." Firstly, you have to wear a poppy. This is quite a new development, first and foremost. And secondly, they're getting angry about FIFA saying that you should not be wearing a poppy because some people might find it quite inflammatory. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable standpoint to say, not because so much of what the poppy would do between England and Scotland, but imagine you gave a carte blanche to nations across the world in international matches to wear political symbols. It'd be dangerous.
Well, the last time England played a game on Remembrance Day, they didn't wear a poppy.
Precisely.
There was no furor about it at all. Let me set out my views carefully and not in an inflammatory way.
Yeah.
If you can imagine the largest possible capital H in front of the word hypocrite that you used, that is how I feel about the British ruling elite and huge sections of the British media on this issue. As I put it on Twitter earlier this week, the larger the poppy, the earlier worn, the more waxen with grief the face at the cenotaph, the bigger the hypocrite we're talking about. As they are standing there with their heads perfectly bowed, having measured how perfectly to bow. They are either in war, killing people, including our own people, or they're planning where to kill next. They are gigantic hypocrites. Now, I used to wear a poppy because I believe that the First World War was the greatest crime ever carried out against the people of this country by our own rulers.
Definitely.
Our rulers are responsible for the flower of a generation being cut down on Flanders fields and elsewhere. The Second World War, I believe, was the noble, just, and heroic war, and was our finest hour. And I used to wear a poppy for that reason. But this hysteria, this almost poppy fascism that has developed in this country over the last 15 years cannot be separated from the rise of militarism and war in our country. And I will not participate in it. So I have no poppy. And I view with suspicion all of those in public life who are brandishing their poppies. And I look at the voting rolls. I look to see if this man or this woman who's wearing a big poppy in Parliament or on television supported the killing of 1 million people in the war in Iraq, is supporting the destruction of Libya, of Syria, of Yemen. And if they are, I put that gigantic capital H in front of the word hypocrite and I pin it, metaphorically speaking, on them. What do you think of that?
I entirely agree. And just on the point of the First World War, we went to, just on, before you got into the show now, we went to the First World War to protect our own naval supremacy. We gave that away to America.
Exactly so. It was a war between cousins as to who would have the bigger empire. And therefore, every man who fell in it, on any of the sides involved in it, was killed by their own rulers. The greatest crime, I repeat it, ever committed against the British people was the First World War. Robert in London, thanks for giving me the opportunity to set out my views on that in advance of Remembrance Day on Friday. Simon says, I would vote Trump with no shame. Call me a racist, call me a bigot, a fascist. I'm used to that after voting Brexit. Well, it's been marvellous for me. I hope it was for you. And if it was, come back next week at the same time to Talk Radio for the mother of all talk shows, and bring somebody with you, because I need the ratings, dear listener.